and I brought this up. I added it as a topic because, I think ground riggers deserve a lot more respect than they get, primarily because they don't get any. But they're the people doing all the work, and I got to respect that. So what are we talking about here? We're talking, ground rigging. Here's my buddy Stu. He's sorting out some hardware, and this is his start of a day for a rigging project. This is actually a performer flying application, and I know that not because of the gear that he's sorting out, but because he's wearing a kilt. So, and if he's wearing a kilt, it means he's not working for me. Okay, setting the tone.
Hey, Bill, can you make your screen a little bit bigger?
I did the full size. Oh, wait a minute. I see. You want me to do that? I forgot that part. That's about as big as I can get it without it going off of my screen. Do you need it bigger than that?
No, that's enough of Stuart's kilt.
Yeah, okay. You can tease him about it later. I didn't tell him I was doing this. So, give you another idea of what ground rigging looks like. All the stuff that isn't truss is going to be the responsibility of the ground rigger. David Glowacki, don't knock the kilt until I've tried it. I've tried it and everybody else knocked it, so I stopped. Okay, so those are the images. Oh, let's sneak off of that for a second. What I'd like people to do, and let's use chat to do this. If you could give me just a 1 or a 2 word description of what you think a ground rigger's duties are. Okay, just start typing in, and please hit everyone. Make sure it's going to everyone, and then we'll compare it to the list that I put together here. Okay. Safety, prep, facilitate upriggers, prep and math, organization, load and position calculations, everything. Safety, prep, double check, leader of rigging team. Keeping folks out of the way. Thank you, Donna. Everything but pull a rope. We're going to discuss that, Donald, because I would respectfully argue with you on that point. Listen to you bellow. All right. We have radios for that, Davin. Okay. So new to ground rigging. I don't, okay. Everything but on the ground. True enough. Let me pull up the list that I put together. Now I got to get this. There we go. So, and granted, folks, I had more time to put this together. All of your suggestions are really good, but you didn't know that I was going to do this, and so I had time to put this together. So I think we have seen people talk about floor markings, finding assembling, finding, if nothing else, the right hoists and the right hardware. It's a ground rigger's job. I mean, you can't put a 2-ton where you're supposed to put a 1-ton. And you can't put a 1-ton with 60 feet of chain where you need a 1-ton with 120 feet of chain. They got to get the right hardware. Inspect the hardware, assemble it. Well, you guys can read the list. Is there anything on my list that you think is not appropriate? I'm not so sure about resending the burlap that fell out, but that was me waking myself up. And this is just the load-in. This is just the load-in. So this gives you a clear idea of why ground riggers need all the respect that they can get, because they're doing all of the work. Okay. Somebody, I think Donna, you were mentioned, the clear the area, clear the lifting zone is what how I call it. I'm going to go back to prep and math. If either of the people, if any of the people who have mentioned doing the math, I'd like to know. Let me back up. Let me preface this by saying that I don't tour. I never toured concerts. I never toured rock and roll. I did one-offs. I was on the crew, but I never toured. The only touring I did back in the day, I toured opera. I also toured some Broadway style shows. But I never did, and this is far enough in back in the day where chain hoists and truss were a rarity. So, this information that I'm presenting is coming from a place where, my company Sapsis Rigging does one-offs more than anything else. We don't tour. As some of you saw yesterday in the photos, we do a lot of crazy stuff, but we don't tour. So I'm not asking you to defend anything, but I am asking for a little bit of clarity. People have mentioned math in a ground riggers list of responsibilities, and I'd like to hear where or how the math comes into play, if anybody is willing to jump in there. Okay. Assuming that people are not speaking with their microphone off, we're not getting 11 new messages. Holy smokes. Math is typically not the issue for a ground rigger. Somebody else has done that. We're going to get, after we get through this screen, we're going to get into the layout of points and stuff, and it will show you that somebody else, it's either the road rigger, the tour rigger, or the house rigger, it's going to be somebody other than the ground rigger who is going to determine where the points are supposed to go and what the makeup of the rigging point or points will be. So the math is being done previous to that. I mean, the ground rigger's got enough to do. If they're doing math also, then I would suggest that somebody else isn't doing their job. Or you're working in a venue that's got limited staff and you're doing, everybody wears a lot of different hats. I don't want to demean, the fact that, you do math. It's just that I would prefer somebody else was doing it so that the ground rigger can do the job that you're supposed to do. Okay. Michael Powers is asking me to find float in the 2 kite shops listed. I'm going to define float. I don't know what the 2 kite shops are. I'm missing that. Floating is getting the hoist in the air. Okay. Once you have determined that the point is in the right location, well, most of the time you determine that the point is in the right location, and then you get the hoist in the air, so that, and by in the air, I'm talking about just off the ground, and you confirm that the point is indeed in the right location. And now you're ready to connect whatever the object is that you're being listed, that's being lifted. Okay, does that answer your question, Michael? Okay, Davin has mentioned that ground riggers don't connect to the object being lifted, nor do they float the object. Okay, I can see that. That's going to be in a situation where you've got personnel who can do that. Andrew is agreeing with him. David Owen is asking, okay, so who does attach and float? Carps, question mark? You're going to see a lot of different answers to that. It depends on, whether it's an IA house or not. If it's an IA house, then it's going to depend on the contract that they have negotiated there. And if it's not an IA house, it's going to depend on A, how many people they have in the venue who are, working on that call, and what agreements they have made. It's not something that is written in stone on a national or even regional level, but it is local to the venue or local to the, the IA contract for that metropolitan area. Okay. So, whoever's responsible, we've got the hoist floating. In my world, because we don't, as I said, we don't tour and we're responsible for everything that's hanging there. We're going to be there to make sure that the connection hardware is done. The slings from the truss to the hoist and the shackles and all that's done properly, that the hoist is positioned properly, the bags are positioned properly. And then we're going to provide a spotter for whatever, for the object being lifted, whether it's a truss, an audio system, whatever it happens to be. We're going to provide a spotter for that. Okay. So what do I have here? Okay. Now I've enlarged these to a point where I think that they're visible for you, but can you see the 2T on the top? Now you can. All right. Just to give you an idea, we're going to kind of give you an idea of some of the symbolism and some of the markings and stuff that ground riggers are going to have to deal with when they walk into a room. Now, remember that the ground riggers have not marked out the room, unless it's a special case, unless you're in a venue where that's what the ground riggers do. But they're going to be working with somebody, either a head rigger, the touring rigger. They're not just going to go in there and willy-nilly do it on their own. At least I hope not. Or if they are doing it, I hope they're getting paid a lot more. So they're going to be dealing with symbols and markings on the floor. One of the things to keep in mind is that none of the markings, none of the symbols that are used on the floor to identify rigging points and equipment and hardware and stuff that goes into that rigging point, none of that stuff is standardized. There is no ANSI standard or OSHA regulation or anything that says you got to do it one way or the other. It has been discussed in the entertainment ANSI standards group, in the rigging working group, in my standards writing body. We have discussed it over the years. Do we want to make a standard for that? And it was decided that we do not, because there are a lot of standards out there. There are a lot of regulations, and those standards and regulations take away a certain amount of individuality in the work that we do. And in many cases, that's just fine, because taking away the individuality increases safety when everybody's doing it the same way and everybody knows what it is that they're supposed to be doing. This is one of those areas where we felt that leaving it up to individuals does not present an issue for safety. If somebody wants to mark this as a 1/2 ton instead of a 2 ton, for example, as long as the person who is getting the gear knows that it's supposed to be a 1/2 ton, then you're good to go. It's not a safety issue. So we haven't written the standards for this, and there are no plans to write standards for this sort of thing. Having said that, however, there are generalities that can be made. Most of the people touring in the US, at least for the hoist markings themselves, what I'm going to show you is what is usually done. All right, so a square with 4 quadrants in it, it's a 2-ton. A circle, it's a 1-ton. And our little pyramid triangle is a 1/2-ton. And I think, yep, our kite is a 1/4 ton. Usually our little ProStar babies here. Now these markings on the floor, they have these internal lines in them breaking them up. You will see people use this area to give additional information. That changes, that varies from venue to venue. If anybody has a standard in their venue on dealing with the hoist identifying markings that's different than what I just showed you, let us know. Because it's always good to see how other people are doing it. And in my world, you're going to see a 1/4 ton, for example. If it's a 60-foot chain, they may end up with a 60 in here somewhere, showing that it's a 60-foot chain, or some other length. If everything is if they're all 60s, but we need a 100 over in one place, they may not mark anything except for the one that needs to be the 100. I put the 100 in there. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, this is a gratuitous St. John the Divine Cathedral SRI photo. That means absolutely nothing to the class today, but I liked it, so I threw it in there. I couldn't tell you what show that is, but it might be the Paul Winter Consort's Winter Solstice concert. It might be. Okay, so we saw the markings for the hoists. Now we're talking about the gear. The hoist is going to go up in the air, but something's got to hold it up there. And so there are various markings on the floor that will identify to the ground rigger what it is they're supposed to do. And this, I started out with this, hoping that this is the right sequence to give you to get a clear understanding of how all this goes together. This is an assembled downtail. It is not a bridle. It is simply a point that hangs straight down. And if you bear with me here for a second, I may have where did it go? No, that's not where I want to be. That's where I wanted to be. Okay, so fumbling Bill once again, folks. We get to where we're supposed to be. So looking at, I'm going to switch things on you. So looking at that assembly, we have a basket, we have a downtail or a stinger, which is the two terms usually applied to the cable that is hanging down, down to the hoist. It may not, and in some cases, in many cases actually, it may not be a piece of wire rope. It may be the hook on the end of the chain from the chain hoist. But in places where you have a high ceiling, but you have a low trim, people will put a stinger in between the beam assembly, the basket, down to the chain, primarily because the stinger is lighter than the chain, so it's easier to pull up. If you're pulling up 10 feet of stinger, and it's 10 feet less of chain you got to get in the air. So using that as an example, and this is where I really just, there we go. I don't have a diagram showing just a basket with a down tail. So using this one and forgetting about one side of it, because this is a diagram of a bridle, but what that previous photo showed was a basket and a down tail. All right, so this whole line here would be straight, and it's a down tail. Let me know if I've confused you enough, or I can try to confuse you some more. So going to the basket, and I apologize, folks. I had these, here we go. Look, now we have one side of a bridle. And I'm going to go through these in a minute. So we're doing the imagery first, give you a look at what's going on. This is a whole bridle assembly. What we are looking at on the ground here is this half, the left side. The diagram does not show the down tail. I don't know why the diagram doesn't show a down tail, but it's going to come out of the apex right here. So we have a 5-foot basket, which is this bad boy, and a 10-foot sling with 5 links of chain in it. So here's the 10-footer coming off, and above it, at the connection for the basket, is where the 5 links of stack chain will be. So what they did here, when they made up this, when they did the math to sort out where this point needed to be, they realized that to get the point in the right location, they needed to add, 5 links or 20 inches, roughly, to this leg to make sure that the down tail and the hoist landed in the spot where it was supposed to be. Okay. So let's go back here. And, oh boy. So this is representational of what a basket looks like once it's in the air. And I use this to also show why we set up a basket, or we set up the attachment point in a very specific, very particular way on the floor that the ground rigger has to know. And we'll go back to the diagram, to the photo in a moment, and compare notes. But I use it this way because it's to my mind, it's easier to show why we do what we do. So when this is on the ground, before it's hauled up in the air to make the point, the work shackle is not connected to the excuse me, to the basket thimble. It's connected to the load shackle, but this is free. This end of the sling, the basket sling, is free. It's flapping in the breeze. Okay, and we have it's a basket. This one is 5 foot, which is a traditional length for a basket. It can be longer, and in rare instances, it might be shorter, but that's extremely rare. But a 5-foot basket, a 10-foot basket, not uncommon, although the 5-footer is the most common one. So the ground rigger is going to make this up on the floor, and he's got all these pieces and parts separate, and he's going to put them together, and he's going to do it in a particular way just because that's the way it has to get done. We have the load shackle. We have the pin and the blade sticking off to the left. That is important, all right? We have the basket now. This is the thimbled eye of the basket, right? That's been attached, that's been put onto the sling, onto the shackle. And the work shackle they've all been put onto the load shackle. They go on in this order for a very specific reason. Finally, the rope that somebody, either the uprigger or possibly the downrigger, the ground rigger, or maybe somebody on a catwalk somewhere up in the air, up in the high steel, somebody is going to pull this up in the air. That rope needs to be in between the captured thimbled eye and the blade. It needs to be on this side of the shackle. All of this is to facilitate making it easier to connect overhead. Remember that this isn't connected when they're pulling it up. It looks like that, right? Yeah, I know now. With this, the one in the drawing is tied opposite, right? Right-handed, left-handed. It still works out the same. So this is not connected to the basket isn't connected to the work shackle yet. They're going to pull it up, and when they pull it up, this thimbled eye and this shackle are going to flop over onto this side of the load shackle, which is why the blade on the work shackle needs to be on the opposite side. If this flops over and gets caught up in the blade, it's going to get stuck there. And it's going to make the uprigger's job that much more difficult, because first he's got to unstick that. He's got to get it unjammed. So this isn't connected. They pull up from here, this and the captured thimble and the work shackle. They flop over here, and they're free because the blade is on the other side. When they get it up in the air, all the rigger has to do is take the free end of the basket sling, toss it over the beam, bring it back down to the work shackle, pull the pin, and then put the thimbled eye in and put the pin back in. Okay? That's all it takes. Now, if this is the same for this application, there would be a down tail here, so that either another sling or the hook from the chain hoist on the chain end would be hanging down here. It's the same for a down tail and the same for a bridle. The only difference, if it was a bridle, is it wouldn't be hanging straight like this. It would be hanging off at an angle like this, because its mate is over on the other side, usually 30 or 40 feet away on the next beam over as they're creating a bridle. Okay? Okay, you're remarkably quiet today. And I have nothing in chat either. Okay. Well, moseying right along then. So hopefully that's clear. And just going back to this, just to give you an idea of what the symbols look like, that's what you're going to see on the floor. And what they're saying in this particular rig, it's a bridle. I got a 5-foot basket on each leg. I got a 15-foot leg on the bridle itself. And I have 4 links of chain, and it's going to be stack chain, sometimes referred to as deck chain, incorrectly, I might add. But it is stack chain, and it's long link chain. And they want 4 links. It's important for the ground rigger to remember that when they make up this assembly on this side, you're going to have a 15-foot long steel sling and 4 links of stack chain. That stack chain has to go at the top. Anybody want to hazard a guess as to why it's got to go to the top?
So adjustments can be made?
Thank you. Exactly right. So that you can reach it. This is way down here somewhere. It's 15 feet away from the beam or thereabouts. You're not going to be able to reach it. You don't want to have to slide down the cable to make the adjustment and then crawl back up again. We frown on that. Okay, so your adjustment chain will always be at the top of a bridle leg, always. Let me go back to the chat here, because there is the pin, rope, cable, shackle. Yeah, bear with me, folks. I did not get I did not get into the chat here, and you guys have been prolific. Oh yeah, David, we're going to get to that. You're absolutely right. Talking not to trap the dead links on the stack chain. Scott Oliver, what is my thought on extra shackle for chain adjustment? Talk to me about where the extra shackle, where you're putting that extra shackle.
So the thought behind that question, you have your two basic shackles that make the basket. Adding a shackle to the load shackle where you normally would put the hook eliminates the need to take the basket apart when you go to adjust the chain. Some people think that's unnecessary. Some people prefer having that safety of keeping the basket intact when you take the chain off to adjust it.
Okay, so let's go to, just so that everybody's on the same page. Let's go to, this is the one that you're referring to. So you're talking about putting another shackle.
Correct.
Hanging from the load shackle, and that picks up the stack chain.
Yes.
So that you get it up in the air and you discover, oh no, it wasn't 5 links that we wanted. It was 6 or 3, whatever. But so you got to pull it back up and adjust it. So what you're suggesting is having that other shackle in there means all you got to do is pull a pin and you can adjust and get the pin back in relatively easily.
Talking about 2 load shackles?
Well, it's a load. Yeah, basically, it's 2 load shackles is what we're talking about here.
Gotcha.
The difference is you don't have to undo your basket in order to adjust the chain.
Mm-hmm. Right. Where are you located?
Colorado.
Colorado. Okay. I don't know if it's a regional thing. Others may be able to chime in on this, but it's not something that I typically see. But, you know, it makes sense. I know that you're going to get some pushback from some riggers who are going to say that the idea of having an extra piece of hardware in the air outweighs the safety issues of pulling a basket apart. You know, there's pros and cons to both situations.
The biggest pushback I received was the guy was afraid he was going to lose 3 inches of trim height.
Right. So we're assuming that you were in, you know, a 15-foot ceiling place to begin with. Is that?
No, 50-foot ceiling place where they wanted 60.
Oh, well. They didn't have their building stretcher with them.
Correct.
While I'm on this screen, a note that David Owen has brought up, which is an extremely important note, is not to trap your dead links. And what he means by that is these are the dead links. We're not using them on this particular rig. They're just flapping in the breeze. Trapping it means that this link, the one that is going to take load, is going to be above the first dead link. So when you apply load to this, it pushes down, it in essence crushes the dead link. The way it's rigged here is correct. If you can visualize it the incorrect way, this link would be up on top of the dead link, and you don't want to do that. Okay? Let's see what else we have here. Okay. Andrew, in your world, fall arrests are usually marked on the kite with FA. Okay, cool. All right. Moving on here. Tyler, and the floor marking without a down tail indicated your hook would go into the apex. Right. Okay. So what you're saying is when we don't have a mark here, that sometimes that means that you just put the hook in there from the chain, and that could be true. It is not true. Well, we don't know. We don't know because the 10-footer is right here. So somewhere down off the bottom of my screen is where the down tail or the down would be. David Owen, you're correct. PRES, pin, rope, eyelet, shackle. If you can say that while you're looking at your assembly, you got it right. And in this case, in this image, we are going right to left. We have pin, rope, eyelet, which is the thimbled eye, and the shackle. So that has been applied correctly. There is no real standard or indication of which way the work shackle needs to be oriented. Some people prefer one way or another, you know, that's entirely up to them. Okay. For those of you who have more gray hair than others, you may remember that Harry Donovan in his classes used to preach that he wanted this thimble, the thimbled eye, to be sent up with the shackle in it, so that, you know, when you flipped this over the beam, that shackle was going over with it also. I never quite understood his reasoning for that. We talked about it on a number of occasions, and I just never got a real good warm and fuzzy about why you would want to do that. It may be that for me that, you know, I'm comfortable in my habit, but I prefer the work shackle to be attached to the load shackle, so that all I'm doing is pulling the pin and putting the thimble eye in once I've wrapped it around the beam. I feel like I can hold that in my hand more easily than I can with the work shackle on the other end of the basket. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, you know, but that's the way it's the way I grew up doing it. Does anybody on the call here have seen or have in their venue where they put a piece of tie line through the hole in the blade on the work shackle so that you can put it around your wrist? So you put your hand through the loop, and when you pull the pin out, even if you drop it, then it doesn't go anywhere because it's on the loop. Does anybody else do that?
I've never seen it.
No? Okay.
No, that's a new one to me.
Okay. You know, it started, you know, a bunch of years ago, and I'm sorry, I just got distracted by Kanna's little plastic bunnies comment. I'm not even sure what that's referring to, and it may take too long to figure it out. Thank you, Kanna.
Bungees.
Bungees, okay, bungees, not bunnies. Well, it's written as bunnies here. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I saw it in some locations. It was the downtown armory. The people there used to do it. I didn't like it because as I'm untwisting the pin, the tie line would twist and tighten up on my wrist. And it just made it harder to configure everything, or at least it felt like it made it harder to configure everything. A lot of this is, you know, the habit. Is, you know, I'm used to doing it a certain way, and I want to continue doing it a certain way because I feel comfortable and confident that I'm not going to drop something. Okay. And I will admit to, I know I've admitted it to other people. I dropped a pin once, very early in my career, and I will never do that again. Well, clearly I'll never do that again. Look at me, am I going to climb anymore? But yeah, dropping a pin is an extraordinarily bad idea for all the reasons that you can think of. Okay, so we've got a standard. This is a standard two-legged bridle with 10-foot bridle legs, 5-foot basket. I think somebody was asking about a split 15, if I remember, back in here somewhere. And if we're lucky, look at that. We got lucky for a change. And I have a question. This is the way I'm used to seeing a split 15. Before the question, let me explain for the people who are not familiar with this. A split 15 or a split anything, split 10, split 20, it is a situation, the reason we have them is because the beam that we are rigging from, which is also the beam that we're sitting on, is so deep, is so tall that you can't reach underneath. You can't reach, in a standard basket, you can't reach underneath to make this connection because the beam's too tall and your arms are too short. So you end up doing a split 15, which means we've got a 10, which is this guy on the left, and a 5 here. Oops, sorry about that. And a 5, so that when you pull it up, this 10 goes over the beam that you're sitting on. That thimbled eye connects to that shackle, so that we're making the connection on the side of the beam. It's simply a question of being able to reach it. What you don't want to have to do, if you've got, if this was all connected the way you would do it on a smaller beam, and you had to make the connection down here, you would have to make that connection on top of the beam. You would have to somehow get all of the parts up to you, make that connection on top of the beam, and getting the parts all up to you is a royal pain in the butt. And then you've got to lower it down underneath where you can't see it, and you can't be absolutely certain that the whole assembly is sitting properly. There are times when a shackle could turn and twist up in the assembly, and you don't want that to happen because it puts undue stress on the whole assembly. So this allows you to safely make a connection where you're sitting on a beam, you're working on a beam that is too tall for you to reach underneath. Okay. Tyler DeLong says, more split 15s when they are wrapping a catwalk. Exactly, right? So in your case, it's not a question that the beam is too tall. It's a question of, the catwalk, or in this, call it a beam, if you will, it's too wide. And you get to make, you're gonna want to make the connection on the side because you can't reach down underneath. The catwalk width won't let you do it. Stephanie, good comment. And we should go back and look at that. Thank you very much for that. Camille is asking, is the rope attached to the eyelet of the 5-foot? In this case, yes. Yes, it is. There's no place else really to tie it. I guess you could tie it. No, you got to tie it into the 5-footer because you got to get the 5-footer up to you. You're sitting on a beam that is 10 feet deep or 8 feet deep. And you need to be able to get this up to you and pull the other side over to you also. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Stephanie asks that, or states that a split 15 requires a longer bowline to lower the connection and still untie the knot from above. That is true. Bear with me, I want to go back to the original drawing. He said, hopefully. Well, that one will do. One of the things that a ground rigger has to be told, and it's going to change it could conceivably change on every point that they make. They're going to be told how long of a bowline they need to put in here. The uprigger will tell you, I need a 6-foot bowline or a 10-foot bowline or a 3-foot bowline. And what they are saying is the loop of that bowline needs to be a certain length so that when they're done making the assembly and they have put it all into place and confirmed that everybody's happy with the way it's all oriented and it's not twisted up or anything, they want to be able to untie the rope without having to move the point. If you've got a 2-foot bowline here, but you really needed a 6-foot bowline, then the uprigger is going to have to pull the whole assembly up to him to be able to untie it. And then he has to lower it back down again. And in that act of raising and lowering, the shackle could get twisted and they wouldn't know about it because it would be back under the beam, wouldn't be able to see it, and not good. Davin, I had to read that a couple of times because I thought at first you were serious. Then I saw the smiley face. Yeah, well, it's important that a ground rigger knows what is 3 feet, what is 4 feet. I've seen them use, people who are dimensionally challenged, I've seen them use a road box, and say, oh, that road box is 4 feet long. Okay, so now I know what a 4-foot bowline looks like, and I can guesstimate what a 3-foot or a 5-foot or a 6-foot looks like. Okay. Yeah, they really get it right. Well, okay, we're dissolving here. We're now talking about cubits. Okay. There are a lot of people on this call today that have no idea what that reference to cubits is. You need more than a little bit of gray hair to remember that one. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm reading some of the, and I'm hoping that you are reading these too. They're all referring to a split 15. All of it is good information. A short note here about the burlap. If you were in one of my earlier classes, you heard me say that burlap doesn't really matter much. It's not going to really give you any protection. It's not going to give the steel sling any protection, but we use it and it makes people feel good, and I'm all for that. All right, where they put it is again a local thing, a regional thing. Let's say this one has it in the open eye of the 5-foot basket. That's absolutely fine. I've seen them put it in the loop of the bowline. I've seen them also put it into the work shackle. Don't like that idea. Don't like that idea at all, because it's just one more thing in the work shackle that you don't need to have to mess around with. You got enough business to take care of getting that pin out and getting it back in properly. I don't like to see the burlap in there. Okay. All right, Kana's with Andrew on this one. What are we talking about here? Well, yeah, that's true. Andrew Monroe says a ground rigger should know how their body subdivides by feet or meters, depending on what part of the pond, what side of the pond you're on. Yeah, what is the measurement from the ground to your hip? What is that? For me, it's measured in inches. What can I tell you? Jacob Loretto says one good argument for burlap I've heard is it protects fire-rated paint on beams. It may be. Okay, I would go for that. While we're here and while I have this image up, stack chain, which as I mentioned earlier, people refer to as deck chain on a regular basis. It is the chain, and again, North America, US in particular, we almost exclusively use stack chain, which is what this chain is. It's a 4-inch long link chain. And it's stacked with STAC for special theatrical alloy chain. It's made by Columbus McKinnon. It comes in 3s, 6s, and 9s, I believe, and you can get it in pretty much any length you want. It has a working load limit of 12,000 pounds. Okay, and yes, I said 12,000 pounds working load limit. So it's butch enough. It'll do the job for pretty much everything that we're going to throw at it. This is and it's only recently. I don't know, Canada. Maybe you're familiar. I don't know who else is here from Europe, but it's only been recently, within the last 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, that they allowed long link chain, which is what this is, to be used in theatrical applications. It's not allowed in many, many other applications because there had a serious concern, and it's a legitimate concern, because this link is 4 inches. If you were to use it in properly and wrap a beam with it, which you should never do, then what will happen is the edge of the beam, the flange, will be up against the body of a linked chain, and it may have a 12,000 pound working load limit pull to pull. When you point load it on the side of the link, it'll collapse at significantly lower loads. So it took a while for the Europeans to convince the authorities that we should be able to use it in the entertainment industry. We don't have that restriction over here in the States. But it is stack chain, and it is not deck chain. Deck chain is typically anchor chain, and it's long link because they need the links to be long so they can wind it up or turn it loose when they're setting an anchor or pulling it back up again. Okay, what do we have over here? Measure JPEG. What is that? It's not opening for me, Sarah. Oop. Oh yeah, right. Bring my shared window to front. How did that? Sharing is being paused. How do I bring my shared window to the front? We do that. That's how we do that. Okay. Yet another lift. What design factor on the stack specification? I believe it's 6. It's not going to be any less than 6. I believe it's 6, but that's a Columbus McKinnon designation. Frankly, I've never had an opportunity to worry about it. With a 12,000 pound working load limit, I was good. All right, let's move on here. We did the split 15. We're okay with that. Let's look at this one. And I have not, we have 53 people. Paul, are you here? Paul Sapsis, are you with us?
I'm here.
Hey, how you doing?
2 a.m. Shanghai time, doing great.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, thank you for joining us, folks. This is my nephew, Paul, who I think hopefully a number of you are familiar with. He is, he's intimately familiar with a lot of the large rigs that we've seen in the last couple of years, and a lot of the performer flying of major rock stars and such. And Paul sent me this image. He also sent me a couple of others. I think I'll get to in a little bit. But I wanted to throw this one up because it's a good image of what a ground rigger can be up against. And you have to know this stuff. I mean, you can't just walk in here and go, and take a guess, because guessing just isn't going to cut it. Paul, do you mind walking us through these points starting with the quarter ton on the outside? Do you mind?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure those were I'm sure those are not quarter tons,
Yeah.
but the triangles to me usually come in as half tons. 1 tons come in as circles. Squares come in as 2 tons. I don't know that I've ever toured quarter tons.
Right.
And I don't know what show this is. What I can deduct from it is that this is just after layout, before the locals have walked around and done the bridle call out, meaning I put the chalk on the floor and we're right in between the phase of the chalk on the floor and the call out for how the steel's gonna start to get worked out. And I think, the obvious thing to be noted in this photo is that we've got a 1 ton with an arrow dragging over to another position with another 1 ton location. And what that's essentially saying is we've kind of gone around, and as we were chalking out, we probably carried the laser level with us and did some efficiency. So where we could move things in order to hit dead hangs or to hit evens, we did that. And in this circumstance, we're dragging that 1 ton from the position it was originally chalked out and giving it a new position. I think it's pretty easy to determine as well, like there's probably an upstage downstage beam and probably a left right beam right in line with all of these points, because I'm sure they didn't chalk out like this. I bet we looked at the room as the information came out from the, what we call the walk and chalk, the mark out sheet. As that information came out to us, we looked at the building and we made it as easy as we could based on what the rig could adapt to, if that makes sense.
If I get that, if I get what you're saying, we're going to assume that this is a line of a beam here, so that you could bring this guy over and hit it,
Yeah.
And this is another line of the perpendicular of another beam perpendicular to it, right?
You are correct.
Hey, I like being correct on occasion. Yeah, when Paul sent me this the other day, I asked him about it because I did not know what this arrow, I had never seen this before. And this goes back to the fact that I don't tour. I liked your explanation. In fact, I wrote some of it down, Paul. I just have to find it. But he sent me an email as an explanation. And let me, I don't know if, the last couple of lines in the top, in this sense, to tour riggers, this was really important to me.
Essentially, I'm just saying that we don't erase points. As the tour rigger, I get used to seeing the floor in a particular way every time.
Right.
And if we start to make changes to the way that looks, I'm gonna identify that as an issue. And if I'm touring 150 points, I'm not going to be able to keep track of what's come and gone as the day goes on. So the arrow helps me identify the change so that, after coffee or 3 hours into the rig, I can reference that change and know either why we made it, or it gives me a datum point for what's happened here. Especially if I've got multiple crews or multiple guys running the floor, I can look down and say, oh, okay, Dan's made this shift in order to hit a dead hang. I can go and tell the electrics guys, hey, you got to move your cable pick by, 4 feet or 3 feet, or make the changes necessary in order to get the rig in.
Right. Very cool. Thank you. That's extremely helpful. And no good deed goes unpunished, Paul. So I'm going to ask you another question, which I hadn't thought about until just now. You tour internationally all the time. I don't want you to you don't have to go into a long song and dance, but is there a significant difference between touring from one continent to another in terms of floor marks, local customs, that kind of thing?
No, not really. I mean, there are things that are different. It's almost a difficult question to answer. Like if you're in a country where theatrical rigging is not standard practice, Israel, for instance, Israel has theatrical rigging, but touring rock and roll doesn't hit there often. you're going to end up with a lot of guys from, you know, the mountain rescue world and rope access and tower work, you know, world.
Right.
So they're going to have different experience. Generally, you're doing some on-site training, you know, explaining how baskets work and things of that nature, and things just, the timeline changes. But you set the standard. You come in, you put the marks down, you're chalking the floor. So you really bring a lot of the same style of mark out with you. And enough of it's happened at this point that you know, a circle's a 1 ton around the world and a square is a 2 ton around the world. And
right.
You'll find different, you know, variations of that from house to house, how they do bowlins, what a standard basket is, what a standard even is. But for the most part, it looks like that.
Cool. Thank you. All right, I'll leave you alone. Yeah, that's what we talked about there. I want to go back to something that I skipped over, and it came up, and I'm not going to try and find it in the chat, but somebody mentioned that the ground riggers don't pull points. And I would, you know, well, I should say that I've given up on that. I've always felt that ground riggers are in a better place to pull a point, or that somebody else other than the uprigger should be pulling the point. You know, when you're an uprigger, your job is to make that connection. That's your job, and put it in the right place. Sitting on a beam, sitting on a 10-inch wide beam, pulling up a 1 ton point with, you know, a 50 foot or a 60 foot point on it. So you got chain and a sling, you're pulling up some weight. You got to sit on it, or however you choose to deal with supporting that weight while you disconnect and reconnect. And I've always opted or pushed for having the ground rigger make the pull so the uprigger has an easier job of it. I try to get my guys to do that. I gave up a long time ago because they just don't want to do it, because it means dragging an extra length of, you know, a longer rope around with you, plus a pulley and, you know, slings or something to make the pulley connection overhead. I'm curious to know if other people have been in that situation. And, you know, I know that there's a number of venues, especially the newer ones, where they're building in a fair number of catwalks so that you can make the pull from the catwalk. The uprigger is out there making the point. Somebody else is on the catwalk pulling the point when the ground rigger is assembling it. Is that becoming more the norm, or is it still pulling a point, you know, from the beam? Anybody want to address that, respond to that?
In Toronto at the Rogers Center, there's 2 systems. Either 1 or 2 ground riggers pull the rope, pull the load up, or they also have winches for pulling loads up.
Winches? You've got bull winches to get the point in the air?
Yeah, I believe the Rogers Center owns winches, and they have a number of them. I don't know, 5, 10, or 15. And the Rogers Center is a stadium, and I guess the idea is if you're pulling rope, I don't know how high it is, 100 feet, 200 feet, it's too heavy for 1 down rigger or 2 down riggers. So they're using winches to pull up rigging and loads.
Right. Okay. And this is where is this?
This is the Rogers Center in Toronto. This is where the Blue Jays meet, right, and where they have big rock concerts.
Right. Okay. I think about 100.
And what it is, the winches are on the ground, so they're actually mobile. They move them into position and then use them there and then take them away.
Okay. So all of us are going to go, you know, immigrate to Canada so we could work at the Rogers Center now, where it makes it easier. Okay.
Seen a team in Cardiff doing the same thing with Honda capstan winches. 2 guys were able to pull about a 150 foot high 2-ton points in a couple of hours. Two
Right.
guys, one with a capstan winch on the catwalk and the other one just setting a redirect pulley.
Sure. And I'm pretty sure it is, but if the captain's winch is of the traditional design that you're referring to, it is a smooth drum that has that basically just sticks out perpendicular from the gearbox and motor, and has no safety on it per se. So you do a couple of wraps with the rope with the bull line around the drum and keep tension on it, and you can pull or let out the rope through those wraps. It's an extraordinarily efficient machine to use as long as you know what you're doing. If you're unsure about how to operate a captain's winch, you should not do it. You should, get the proper training, because it's easy. It's very easy to get in trouble with a captain's winch. They're great machines as long as you know what you're doing. Jacob Loretto, 4 people pulling a 2-ton. So where are the 4 people, Jacob? We're not hearing you, so maybe throw it into chat. Okay, so they're up on the steel. Okay, it's a lot of people overhead. Yeah, that David Owens comment of a bit, it's it's crowded. Is I agree with, and you can't do that now because you're not socially distancing, right? Okay, let's see where we're headed here after this. Oh, right. If I may, we're going to go to the loadout now. If I've missed something in the load in or the run of the show, please let me know. But I wanted to point out that, the show's up in the air. The ground rigger is not done. This stuff's got to go home. And those are all the things that a ground rigger needs to do, needs to know. And I don't know how much conversation we want to have about this, other than I have a couple of safety tips that I need to point out as a ground rigger. And first and foremost, and this is in particular when you're dealing with Lodestar chain hoists, with the CM chain hoists, who do not have a chain point, a chain port. So when you're running the chain out, it could jam as you're letting the chain through the hoist. So you got to keep tension on it. You keep a little tension on it so that it runs through the hoist okay. But the problem with that is that people will get too close to a chain hoist when they're running it out, and then they get distracted, and then they do a bad thing. If they're too close to the hoist and they get distracted or bored, which is probably more to the point, you run a risk of getting your finger pulled into that chain port. And I know that there were a number of people who just grimaced as they remember not having it happen to them, but having it happen to somebody that they know. It happened only once that I'm aware of on one of my jobs, because it was a new guy and he wouldn't take direction, and he didn't listen is what he didn't do. So here's what I'm referring to. The hoist, you're loading out and the hoist has been disconnected from the object. The object is gone. The hoist is sitting on the floor. The chains are all on the floor. They got to go back in their crate, or maybe they're already in their case. But the chains have to be run out so that they're prepped for the next gig 2 nights down the road or whatever, So you run them out. Now with a Lodestar, as I said, you got to hold on to the chain, keep tension on it. Otherwise it could jam going into the port. A standard Lodestar runs at 16 feet per minute. And at 16 feet per minute on a 60-foot chain, it's going to take a while. And oh, by the way, you've got 40 or 50 more of them to do, and it's 3 a.m. Your focus tends to shift. You lose focus, or you start staring off into space, or whatever, talking to your buddy, or whatever you're doing. Under the best of circumstances, as you're holding onto that chain, you may find yourself starting to drift into the hoist. I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that if you're setting up your ground people to do this, make sure they understand that they need to stand at least 3 feet away from that hoist that they're running, because they will find that, when they finish running the chain through the hoist, they'll be 1.5 feet or 2 feet away, that they've already kind of drifted in a foot or 18 inches. You do not want to get caught up in the chain port. I can tell you that the chain port does not need any extra lubrication. Going back to the chat here. Running out chain. People have a bunch to say here. Michael, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a case-by-case basis whether or not you run the chains out. If they're just going back to the rental house from that particular gig, then it depends on how much you want to piss off the guys at the rental house. If it's on tour, then I think you're going to want to make sure that the chains are run out so that they're ready to get pulled the next night or the night after that, 1,000 miles away, as Jackson Brown once said. The other thing to remember is that once you run the chain all the way out and you hit that limit switch, then you want to back off. You want to go in the opposite direction of for at least a foot, maybe 18 inches or 2 feet or so. And you do that for 2 reasons. And again, this is the ground rigger's job. You do that for 2 reasons. One, you want to get the limit switch contactor. You want to separate those two. So the thing that pushes up against that little electromechanical switch inside the hoist is not engaged. Because if it is engaged and you throw the hoist into the box and you throw the box into the truck and it goes bouncing down the highway for 1,000 miles, it's going to use up a bunch of the little clicks that limit switch has in its very finite little life. And you don't want to waste them on the highway. And as I've told other people, if I did that on my hoist, they spend a lot of time on the New Jersey Turnpike. And, if we left the chains, left the limit switches on, the contactor on the switch, man, we'd have broken limit switches all the time. The other reason is somebody pointed out, I'm not sure who, you want to make sure that if you end up in a phase reversal situation on the next gig, that you have some chain to be able to move one direction or the other that will help you determine that you are in a phase reversal situation. If it's sitting on the limit switch, you won't have any way of knowing that. Okay. Wow, we got 5 minutes left. I think I've reached nirvana. Yeah, I would, for a couple of reasons, I would not recommend this as a work position for a ground rigger. I don't know who this is, and I certainly mean no disrespect, but because I have no idea what is actually going on in this particular photograph. I mean, the guy could be asleep for all I know on a break. But sitting on the floor makes getting out of the way of a falling object all that much more difficult. Staring up overhead means that the dust and the dirt that is being knocked about by the upriggers is going to end up in your eyes, because that's kind of a rule. And upriggers sweat, so I'd keep my mouth shut if I were you. Right, we'll get to this in just a second. I told somebody that I'd show that Michael Sapsis, my brother, does exist, and he does. So there he is. This is the quietest group that I've seen, that we've had in a while here, but you've been typing like crazy. He's shooting the point. Is that what that's going on? Oh, right. I'm sorry. I didn't even see that. That's the smallest laser device I've seen in a long time. But you're right. He is shooting the point. He's sending a laser beam up to the steel to make sure that when he marks out, it's in the right place. Okay, typical pose that for Mike. Yeah, well, that would be Mike. If you have no other questions, I want to talk about next week. Anything else that you want to talk about as far as ground rigging is concerned? Buy the laser, buy the stick. Yeah, exactly. You know, he's young yet. I think that in another couple of years, he'll definitely be looking to buy the stick. And folks, what we're talking about with the stick is you can make one or you can buy one where you stick the laser on the stick and it's got chalk or a marker of some sort on one end and the laser on the other so that you can shoot the point and mark the floor and you don't have to sit down like that or bend over. So the next 2 weeks are the last two that are on. Next 2 weeks, we'll have the last two seminars that are on the current schedule. I don't know about you, but I'm enjoying these. And the feedback I'm getting says that some of you at least are enjoying them. And a lot of you keep showing up. So I'm going to assume that, you know, we're doing okay. So what I'd like to suggest is that we do more of them down the road. But I'm looking for topics. So here's my email address. And you can use this to let me know that you're, of your certification status. And also if you have ideas or for a topic, let me know and we'll take it on. I can tell you that I'd rather not do a math session. I'll do it if you really, really, really want me to. But there's a lot of people out there who are doing math classes. And to be blunt, I find them pretty boring. And, that it's information that's available to you in a lot of places. So I'm thinking that I'd rather take on topics that other people, they're not doing, that are interesting and informational. Thanks, Jake. You're right. Okay, so unless you have something else you want to discuss, I think we're good here. And next week is equity and inclusiveness. This is going to be, I hope, a very interesting conversation. I want you, if you're going to join us, if you come, please come prepared to offer opinions and discussion. This is not going to be it's not a technical. How you do that? It's a whole nother world that we'll be in. But I think it's an extremely, extremely important topic that needs to be discussed and worked on. So thank you all very much. Have yourself a good afternoon. I am going to stop sharing here. One more time, I think. No, that's not the one I wanted. Where did he go? Where did Michael go? There he is. Okay. One more time for Michael.